Hello and welcome to Biblical Buffet. Today we will go back to our quick bite scenario. So we will have a very short, not even a lesson, just a thing that I need to share, that I want to share about Book of Job. Okay, when we read Book of Job, usually in my years of studying, teaching, sharing, praying over Book of Job and my life and life of other people, I came into conclusion that usually you can run into three main misconceptions that actually can be harmful for spiritual growth, for understanding of the scripture, and misconceptions cannot be actually helpful, cannot be helpful. So misconception number one is when we read Book of Job as a book of suffering of a person. And by that I mean Job is a person. And he definitely suffers. And I don't want to go into trying to kind of like water down the experience he goes through. The experience he goes through is horrific. It is terrible. I can only make a very childish attempt to comprehend what a father goes through when his kids are killed in a storm, and basically he now needs to bury them, and that all of that experience is one. But still, we need to understand that Job is not presented actually in the Bible. If we read it carefully, we can obviously see it as one person who is singled out of his society. What I mean is, he is actually a leader to a big group of people. If we read in the very beginning that there was a man in the land Uz, and chapter 1, verse 2, there were born to him 7 sons, 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and very many servants. So however you want to call them, however you want to call him, a leader, chief of the tribe, or a king, I'm not going to fight with terminology. My point is, he is a king type figure, because the place where he lives is actually, again, by the end of chapter 2, when everything develops, we can see that the territory that he controls is attacked on north side and on the south side. It's not even a village. It's a big thing. Just think about that. Think about that for a second. 7,000 sheep. 3,000 camels. How many people you need to have to take care? How many shepherds? How many people who, shear the sheep? How many people to water the camels? On one hand, it's those people who are kind of shepherd-like, but there should be, a vet. Probably not even one. People who would take care of the health of these animals. People who would be blacksmiths to provide some other stuff that needs to be built. Carpenters. All the thing that builds around this kind of farmland community. So I'm happy with the word king. You might be happy with the word chief. My point is, when he goes through trouble, it's not only him who is attacked. That's his kingdom is under attack. And one of the challenge that very often that slips from our attention is his responsibility to many widows, many orphans, who became widows and orphans because his land was attacked from the north and from the south. Many people who used to live on the borders are died. Now there is no man. Now how he will protect his widows and orphans in his community? That's misconception number one. So it's not only personal thing. Therefore, that's why I have 3 friends as kind of friends. Because friends of a king are not necessarily his buddies that he go to a local pub Friday night, and have, glass or 2 of Guinness or something like that. Or, if you live on the Central Coast, IPA would do it, perfectly as good as anything. My point is, it's his main advisors. So with this, the second misconception actually is sometimes you run into people who believe that he was a self-righteous guy, because we have it here in our wars that he was a righteous man, blameless and upright in verse 1. And people try to read it as he thought of himself as blameless and upright. The thing is, once I had a personal experience that I want to share is going through some hard period of my life, I decided to read through Book of Job. Okay, first of all, I would suggest nobody to do that. You do not need to read Job when you go through tough times. But actually, one smart thing I actually did. So what I did relatively smart was I first read chapter 42. All that helped me always to keep in mind that by the end of the story, God says, actually, whatever you guys said about me, whatever Job said about me, he said it better and right. Okay? And we need to understand that the concept of righteousness, even in the New Testament, we have a couple of important figures, father and mother for John the Baptizer in chapter 1 of Luke's Gospel. In verse 6, we have Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth, and in chapter 1, verse 6, and they were both righteous before God, walking blamelessly. Okay? So it is actually God who sees him righteous, not necessarily sinless, but righteous in the sense that he is right in his relationship. And that actually leads to the third misconception about the book of Job. Very often, when we go, that's the structure. I'm not going to go through the very much detail on that, but by the end, in chapters 38 to 32, verse 6, God answers. There is an answer from God. It's actually twofold, but not going to deal with that right now. So this twofold answer of God, and it starts on the theme of creation, like where you were when I made the boundaries for the water, that the waves cannot go any further. Where you were when I created those animals, where I put the stars and I made them walk their paths and not something else. And we see that as, how can I say, sometimes we read it or we hear about that God is so great and Job is so small that he's almost like a spiritual nobody, and God is so cool and he can do whatever he wants. The thing is, actually, chapter 38 to 42 they have so many parallels with chapter 3 when Job asks his questions. I'm just gonna dare to read I'm reading from David Dorsey, The Literary Structure of the Old Testament, great book, small paragraph. In all, over 60 nouns and verbs in Job's curse are repeated in Yahweh's speech. In Job's curse, repeated in Yahweh's speech. 60. In many instances, the repetition is multiple, so that the total number of repetitions reaches over 140. Every verse in Job's curse has one verbal echo in God's speech, and the most verses are multiple echoes. So actually, what Job going through this experience is longing for is for God to answer him. And if we read book carefully, that's what God does. He doesn't forces anything upon Job. He does not press him to feel like a nobody. What he does is he exactly answers all Job's questions. Stay blessed.